This has just been published by Haaretz, by the Israeli paper, and it confirms what we've been saying all along, that the Israelis killed their own people on October 7, and this was done using the Hannibal directive. And let's look at the article. It's called IDF ordered Hannibal directive on October 7 to prevent Hamas taking soldiers captive. Okay, so Gaza division operations and airstrikes in the first hours of October 7 were based on limited information. The first long moments after the Hamas attack was launched were chaotic. Reports were coming in with their significance not always clear. When their meaning was understood, it was realized that something horrific had taken place. Communication networks couldn't keep up with the flow of information, as was the case for soldiers sending these reports. However, the message conveyed at 11:22 a.m. across the Gaza division network was understood by everyone. Not a single vehicle can return to Gaza. Okay, so those are the exact words. Not a single vehicle can return to Gaza. Now, I'll interrupt reading this to perhaps show you some of the footage from a helicopter from October 7. You can see where they're destroying all the tanks. The homes are being destroyed by the tanks. So you have Israeli tanks firing at their own settlers. Okay. And there's also footage of, so I think it was recorded by a drone, which I showed to you before, and you can see how they're destroying all the vehicles and all the people that are running away from the festival or being taken back into Gaza. Okay. So you see that car right there with people running away. They just completely destroyed it. No consideration for who's in there, who that is. Just destroy and kill everything and everyone. Okay, so let's continue with the article. At this point, the IDF was not aware of the extent of kidnapping along the Gaza border, but it did know that many people were involved. Thus, it was entirely clear that what the message meant and what the fate of some of the kidnapped people would be. All right, so there's no misunderstanding here. They didn't think like, oh, these are purely Palestinians. And by the way, even then, like, let's say there were no Israelis on the ground. Why are you just shooting at people who are clearly civilians? You can see they're civilians. And if you can't distinguish, then you shouldn't be firing, should you? If you can't distinguish, because then you're also basically killing civilians de facto. So this was not the first order given by the division with the intent of foiling a kidnapping, even at the expense of the lives of the kidnapped, a procedure known in the army as the Hannibal procedure. Documents obtained by Haaretz, as well as testimonies of soldiers, mid-level and senior IDF officers, reveal a host of orders and procedures laid down by the Gaza Division, Southern Command, and the IDF General Staff up to the afternoon hours of that day, showing how widespread this procedure was from the first hours following the attack and at various points along the border. Haaretz does not know whether or how many civilians and soldiers were hit due to these procedures, but the cumulative data indicates that many of the kidnapped people were at risk, exposed to Israeli gunfire, even if they weren't the target. I mean, I don't know how they can say even if they weren't the target. If you're saying it's Hannibal directive, then obviously the Israelis are the target. That's what the Hannibal directive was. Okay. At 6:43 a.m., at which time rocket barrages were launched at Israel and thousands of Hamas operatives were attacking army strongholds, and the division's observation and communications capabilities, the division's commander, Brigadier General Abi Rosenfeld, a very Middle Eastern name, Rosenfeld, right, declared that the Philistines have invaded. Really? It sounds like the Europeans have invaded, Mr. Rosenfeld. In any case, this is the procedure when an enemy invades Israeli territory, upon which a division commander can assume extraordinary authority, including the employment of heavy fire inside Israeli territory in order to block an enemy raid. A very senior IDF source confirmed to Haaretz that the Hannibal procedure was employed on October 7, adding that this was not used by the divisional commander. Well, who gave the order then? This, said the source, will perhaps be established by post-war investigations. In any case, says a defense official who, I mean, sorry if I can just interrupt myself. They say post-war investigations. Well, you can't have post-war investigations if the war never ends, right? That's Netanyahu's logic. In any case, says a defense official who is familiar with the October 7 operations at the Gaza Division, in the morning hours, no one knew what was going on outside. He says that Rosenfeld was in the war room, not emerging, while outside a world war was raging. Everyone was shocked by the number of terrorists who had penetrated the base. Even in our nightmares, we didn't have plans for such an attack. No one had a clue about the number of people kidnapped or where army forces were. There was crazy hysteria with decisions made without any verified information. Pay attention how he says penetrated the base. The base, not the houses, which again, even in the houses, if you have weapons in the houses, which Israeli settlers do, and Israelis all have to join the army, so they're trained professional killers who stay in the army as reservists till they're 40. But they're attacking military bases. Terrorists don't attack military bases per se. They usually attack civilians. Not always, but that's not the only criteria. But it's just so ridiculous how they can't grasp the concept that, you know, we put a base on their land and now they're attacking the base because they don't want us on their land. But okay. Just continuing here, one of these decisions was made at 7:18 a.m. when an observation post at the Yifta outpost reported that someone had been kidnapped at the Erez border crossing adjacent to the IDF's liaison office. Okay? So border crossing. What is a border crossing? It's a military checkpoint. Again, military targets. And it's just adjacent to the IDF's liaison office. So basically part of it. Okay? Do you notice how these Israeli soldiers themselves are not only saying they fired on their own people, but that Hamas attacked military targets? Okay? And they kidnapped soldiers from those military targets. Hannibal at Erez came the command from divisional headquarters. Hannibal at Erez. Okay? Dispatch a Zik. The Zik is an unmanned assault drone, and the meaning of this command was clear. So this looks like the second one. Okay? This is the second command that day, referring to Hannibal, and it's not at 11 a.m., it's at 7 a.m. already. So it's very clear what's going on. Hamas are attacking the military outposts. Soldiers are being kidnapped. Okay, just kill the soldiers. This wasn't the last time that such an order was heard over the communications network. Over the next half hour, the division realized that Hamas terrorists had managed to kill and abduct soldiers serving at the crossing and at the adjacent base. This is the third time in the article they mentioned that Hamas attacked military targets. Just pay attention to that. I know it's not the point of the article, but I'm making it a point. Then at 7:41 a.m., it happened again. Hannibal at Erez, an assault on the crossing and the base, just so that no more soldiers be taken. Such commands were given later as well. The Erez border crossing was not the only place this happened. Information obtained by Haaretz and confirmed by the army shows that throughout the morning, the Hannibal procedure was employed at two other locations penetrated. The Reim army base, where the divisional headquarters were located, and the Nahal Oz outpost, in which female spotters were based. This did not prevent the kidnapping of 7 of them or the killing of 15 other spotters, as well as 38 other soldiers. Interesting. So all of these targets, I've lost count. What is it? 4, 5, 6 military targets. This shows you that Hamas went after legitimate military targets, that their intelligence was very good. They knew exactly which crossing to go to, which outposts and divisional headquarters to target, and what to do when they get there. Again, even the Israelis would agree, it's absolutely immaculate planning and execution for a military operation. It's immaculate. Nothing like this ever done before. On this scale, nothing. Over the next few hours, division headquarters started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, realizing the extent of the Hamas attack, but missing the invasion of kibbutz near Oz, which the First Army forces reached only after the terrorists had left. Regarding the frequency of employing the Hannibal procedure, it seemed that nothing changed. Thus, for example, at 10:19 a.m., a report reached divisional headquarters indicating that a Zik, again, that's a drone, a killer drone, not a surveillance drone, had attacked the Reim base. 3 minutes later, another such report arrived. At that time, Shaldag commando forces were already on the base fighting the terrorists. To this day, it's not clear whether one of them was hurt in the drone attack. That means yes. What is known is that over the communications network, there was a message asking everyone to make sure no soldier was outdoors on the base, since IDF forces were about to enter and drive out or kill remaining terrorists. I mean, just look at that photo. Just look at that photo. Okay? There are piles, literally piles of cars, burnt, completely burnt out, that the Israelis crushed. What that means is that those were destroyed by the Israelis, because if you're burning entire, I mean, we're not talking about one vehicle. Of course, anyone can burn one vehicle. I'm talking about dozens and dozens of cars. Completely burnt out, obviously destroyed by missiles from helicopters, which were dispatched that day, which did fire on the Israelis, or by drones, which also happened, or by tanks, okay? Hamas did not have helicopters, they don't have tanks, and they didn't bring, as far as I know, they didn't bring rocket-propelled grenades in that quantity. I'm sure they had some, but not to that quantity, that not to the point that they could pull off something like that. So my point here is that the Israelis literally destroyed dozens and dozens of vehicles indiscriminately, and then crushed all of the cars so that there's no forensic evidence left to actually investigate and find out, because you can collect, you can do chemical analysis and find the exact ammunition that was used and prove who did it. But we can deduce just from the photos and images of that this was not Hamas, because Hamas didn't have that firepower on that day. Okay? Another important point I want to drive home, just because this photograph is making me think of that, all right? So I'll continue reading the article. It goes on to say, the decision to conduct attacks inside outposts, says a senior defense official, will haunt senior commanders all their lives. Anyone making such a decision knew that our combatants in the area could be hit as well. But such attacks took place, it turns out, not only inside outposts or bases. At 10:32 a.m., a new order was issued, according to which all battalions in the area were ordered to fire mortars in the direction of the Gaza Strip. Internal discussions in the army noted this order, attributed to, again, Brigadier General Rosenfeld, what a Middle Eastern name, was heavily criticized, since at that time the IDF did not have a complete picture of all the forces in the area, including soldiers and civilians. Some of these were in open areas or in woods along the border, trying to hide from the Hamas terrorists. At that point, the army did not know the number of people who had been kidnapped. We thought they numbered dozens at that stage. Firing mortars at the Gaza Strip would endanger them as well. Furthermore, another order given at 11:22 a.m., according to which no vehicle would be allowed to return to Gaza, took this step further. Okay? So, just to recap, all morning they're saying, dispatch a drone, use the Hannibal directive, use the Hannibal directive, destroy and kill everyone that you see. And then on top of that, at 11:22 a.m., they're saying no vehicles whatsoever. Like every single thing that is going to Gaza, blow it to hell. Okay? And they're doing this on both sides of the so-called border. So they're doing it inside Gaza with mortars. They're doing it inside and around the military headquarters and outposts and checkpoints and border crossings. And they're doing it just randomly at the music festival as well. And I'll just say one thing, because you saw the quote here. It says that we thought they numbered dozens at that stage. So this Israeli soldier is telling the newspaper that it's okay to kill a few dozen Israelis, right? To stop them being taken hostage. It's not like my life is in danger, so I'm killing the other Israelis. No, it's just like, I don't want them to be taken hostage. I'm going to murder them. So if it's a few dozen, it's okay for them. It's okay to kill their own people. Amazing, right? Amazing. That's called murder usually, but okay. In addition to that, they're making it sound like, oh my God, it was so chaotic. They didn't know what was going on. We thought it was just a few hostages. We didn't know it's so many. Okay, but you know now. Why are you still bombing Gaza and killing your own people? You killed at least 70 Israelis in Gaza since October. You know that they're in Gaza. That you claim you're bombing Gaza because of them, and yet you're killing them. You know they're there. You're killing them. I mean, it's unbelievable. So this nonsense of, oh my God, it was so chaotic. We didn't know it. Everyone knew by then that such vehicles could be carrying kidnapped civilians or soldiers. A source in Southern Command is the one that told that to Haaretz. Okay, so I mean, look how many different sources we have. It's ridiculous, right? This is a very well-written article. There's no doubt. There was no case in which a vehicle carrying kidnapped people was knowingly attacked, but you couldn't really know if there were any such people in a vehicle. I can't say there was a clear instruction, but everyone knew what it meant to not let any vehicles return to Gaza. Well, hold on, what is this? What is this quote? He's saying there's no case where we knew that civilians were in the vehicle and we fired on them, but you couldn't know that there were civilians in there, so we fired anyway. Okay, so you killed civilians. I mean, it's like you gambled. You basically gambled, knowing that there could be civilians. So you did know that there could be civilians in there. This is like such fucking lawyer talk, you know? I wonder if it's a military lawyer that they're interviewing. This is how a lawyer speaks, all right? Again, I'm going to read this to you again. It's so ridiculous. There was no case in which a vehicle carrying kidnapped people was knowingly attacked. But you couldn't really know if there were any such people in a vehicle. I can't say there was a clear instruction, but everyone knew what it meant to not let any vehicles return to Gaza. Yes, there was a clear instruction. You've literally told us that they said use the Hannibal directive. That's a clear instruction. And I mean, it's like this person is saying something and answering themselves in both sentences, right? I can't say there was a clear instruction, but everyone knew what it was to not let any vehicles back into Gaza. Okay, fine. A new development occurred at 2 p.m. All the forces were instructed not to exit border communities toward the west in the direction of the border, with an emphasis on not chasing terrorists. At that point, the border area was under intense fire directed at anyone in that area, making it a danger zone. Okay, so well into the afternoon, they're still shelling everyone and everything. The instruction, says the source in Southern Command, was meant to turn the area around the border fence into a killing zone, closing it off toward the west. At 6:40 p.m., military intelligence believed that many terrorists were intending to flee together back to the Gaza Strip in an organized manner. This was near Kibbutz Be'eri, Kfar Aza. I mean, anyone who speaks Arabic and knows what Kibbutz Be'eri means. Kfar Aza and Kisufim. It's funny because they've renamed a lot of these settlements. It's really weird. It's like they've bastardized them from Arabic into Hebrew. Anyway, that's another discussion. Following this, the army launched artillery raids at the border fence area, very close to some of these communities. Shortly afterwards, shells were fired at the Erez border crossing. The IDF says it was not aware of any civilians being hurt in these bombardments. Well, I mean, that's ridiculous because you're saying that you're firing them at some communities, right? So when they say communities, they mean a settler colony, because all of these kibbutz in Hebrew or modern Hebrew means a settler colony. It's a bunch of houses that they've built illegally on top of Palestinian land and populated. So again, contradictions and contradictions. They know what they're firing at. They know these are settlements, and then they say, well, we didn't know we're firing at civilians. What do you mean? I mean, if you say you're not aware of that, there are Israelis, and I've played these clips to you, saying on camera we were hit and shot at by Israeli tanks. So, okay, the IDF can deny it, but Israelis themselves are saying the Israeli tanks fired at me in my house or in my kibbutz and so on. So, I mean, we don't really need the IDF in that case. But anyway, unrestricted fire, okay? So one case in which it is known that civilians were hit, a case that received wide coverage, took place in the house of Pesci Cohen. Oh, speak of the devil. I was just talking about that. So that's in Kibbutz Be'eri. 14 hostages were held in the house as the IDF attacked, 13 of them killed. Now that fact, again, if you go on British television and you try to explain this, how dare you, you anti-Semite? How dare you, Hamas propaganda? How dare you? But the Israelis themselves are admitting it. Israelis are eyewitnesses saying, I was shot at by an Israeli tank. Israeli papers saying, look, they killed 13 out of 14 Israelis. The Israeli army killed 13 out of 14 Israelis. It's so funny how Israeli media can sometimes be more open than in the West. You know why? Because they need money from the West and they need political support from the West. They don't need it from Israelis. They don't give a shit, right? Although there is, again, a whole different level of propaganda inside of Israeli society itself. That's a different topic, but I'm just showing you how weird it is that Western media is sometimes more restricted than Israeli media itself. I mean, they're both controlled by Zionists anyway, so what difference does it make? So, in the coming weeks, the IDF is expected to publish the results of its investigation of this incident, which will answer the question of whether Brigadier General Barak Hiram, the commander of Division 99, who was in charge of operations in Be'eri on October 7, was employing the Hannibal procedure. Did he order the tank to move ahead, even at the cost of civilian casualties, as he stated in an interview he gave later to the New York Times? Well, again, you're just saying that he said that to the New York Times, so yes, he did. Man, I swear to God, it's like Israeli. You can't talk about anything Israeli without contradictions like popping up in the same sentences. Did he order the tank to move ahead even at the cost of civilian casualties, as he stated in an interview? Yes, because you just said he stated it in an interview. Why are you asking the question? Over all the months that have passed, the IDF has refused to say whether this procedure was employed against civilians who had been taken hostage. It now seems that even if the answer is positive, the question may have been only a partial one. The actions of Hiram may have simply been congruent with the way the IDF operated that day. So what they're trying to tell you here, they've put it in a very weird way, but I'll translate it for you. They're saying basically they don't even know if these people were hostages. They literally just shot at them. So it's not even Hannibal directive anymore. It's just standard Israeli policy, right? Standard Israeli practice. The same way they operate anywhere else, in Syria, in Gaza, in the West Bank. Just shoot. Just shoot. Who cares what you're shooting at? Just shoot, right? A very American, a very Israeli way of doing things. That's what they're trying to tell you here. They don't even know if there were hostages there. Just shoot. Right? Because the Hannibal directive says there have to be hostages. This is something else. It's just standard Israeli practice. As far as Haaretz knows, even at 9:33 p.m., right? So we've gone all the way from 7 in the morning to 9 in the evening, right? It's just like massacre the entire day, 24 hours. Right? Okay, well, it's a little more about 12. I'm not going to exaggerate now, but this was still the situation on the ground at 9 in the evening. At that time, there was a further order from Southern Command: close off all the border area with tanks. In fact, all forces in the area received permission to open fire at anyone approaching the border area without any restrictions. There you go, right? So again, just shoot. The IDF spokesman responded by saying that the army has been fighting for 6 months at high intensity on several fronts, focused on attaining the war's objectives. Really? Because they're doing a very bad job, but okay. In tandem, the IDF has begun conducting internal investigations of what transpired on October 7 and the preceding period. The aim of these investigations is to learn and draw lessons which could be used in continuing the battle. When these investigations are concluded, the results will be presented to the public with transparency. You know, I sometimes loathe the way spokesmen or spokespersons and diplomats speak. It's so ambiguous and abstract. What the fuck are you saying? What does this have to do with anything? You could have said this at any day in the war. It's nothing to do with everything we just read. It's the end of the article, by the way. We've reached the end. But anyway, you can essentially interpret this statement by the IDF spokesperson as a denial. So even though we have all these IDF people or IOF people confirming it, the spokesperson is obviously not going to do that because it's too scandalous. But you know, I find this very funny because he's saying we have to do an investigation. Well, if you have to do an investigation, why did you attack Gaza then when you were so sure of everything that you were saying back then, right? Because you have to understand that, I mean, no matter what they said on October 7, it doesn't justify the genocide. I mean, genocide is it's illegal as an absolute. There is no justification for genocide. Even if someone commits genocide against you, there is no justification for it. It's completely forbidden. It's an absolute. Nevertheless, let me submit to you this thesis that we're just going to pretend the Israelis didn't want to commit genocide, but they just wanted to take back the hostages. Let's go along with their nonsense for a second, all right? Why did you do that if now you're telling us that you've been fighting for 6 months and you still don't know what happened? Because again, it's this typical Israeli contradiction, right? If you've been fighting for 6 months and you don't know what happened, why are you fighting then? Which one is it? Do you know what happened and you're fighting because of that, or you don't know and you should stop? It's really funny. It's really, really funny. But in any case, you know, we come back to the barbarism of Israelis. And again, I hope that in colloquial English and other languages, we start saying Israeli, Zionist instead of Nazi and barbarian. I mean, it's too soft to say Nazi and barbarian. I don't know of people behaving like this in any conflict. And I was just saying that with Professor Marendi. I just don't know. Never heard of this. I'm sure that some people have ordered airstrikes on themselves. Yes, that's happened before in conflict, where someone will order, they're surrounded and they say, come and bomb me and take out the enemy at the same time. That's something completely different, right? And they get posthumous medals and so on. That's different. But for an army to willingly and as a matter of military doctrine, as a matter of policy, bomb its own soldiers and civilians, right? Never, ever seen anything like this. Never. And I know my World War II history very, very well. But before so rise of Nazi Germany and World War II itself, never heard of anything like this. Even the Nazis didn't do things like this, right? So that shows you, and they did a lot of depraved things. So that shows you how low the Israelis have fallen. Just really disgusting behavior, but it's perfectly in line and typical of what they do, right? Because if you look at how they target Arabs and Muslims, they do just bomb everyone and shoot at everyone and bomb everything like that. They do that indiscriminately, right? As a matter of almost, you could compare it to carpet bombing, not in the terms of its scale, but the way that it's indiscriminate. So why wouldn't they do that to their own people as well, right? I mean, if you're even putting your people at risk like that, there's something wrong with you. Why would you move from a secure country to Palestine or Lebanon or Syria and live in a war zone, or the West Bank? Why would you even want to live there in the first place? You know that you're living on someone else's land. You know that they're going to fucking kill you and take it back. Why would you even go there? So the whole society is messed up in the head. They willingly commit murder, they steal, and they live on top of the land while they treat the rest of the population like crap, like subhuman, knowing that they are at risk, and they don't care. So the whole population puts itself at risk anyway. So why wouldn't they kill each other for the sake of, perpetuating the colony and making sure that they don't have any hostages captured? Because, when you're saying, okay, I'm going to kill Israelis, who are with me in the army or living next door in a kibbutz, and you kill your own people like that, why are you doing that? What is the goal? Why don't you want them to be taken hostage? Because you're afraid that if they're taken hostage, they will then use you, or rather the Israeli hostages, as something to demand concessions from the Israelis to get Palestinians released. We've had this in the past before. You've had Lebanese resistance fighters kidnap Israeli soldiers, for example, in 2006. But perhaps I should give a better example of in Palestine, where the resistance captured Israeli soldiers and then asked for their prisoners to be released, very much like now. And they got those deals, right? You had 1,000 Palestinians released for one Israeli soldier, right? 1,000 Palestinians for one Israeli soldier. So obviously, as a Palestinian, you're going to do that knowing the conditions that Palestinians are living in prison. But for an Israeli, do you hate the idea of releasing Palestinians so much that you're ready to kill your own people? It's a very interesting concept. I mean, it's pretty fucked up, That's a really, really, really deep hatred. I don't know. Never heard of anything like that. Never, ever heard of anything like that, ever. And then they say that, the Hamas and Hezbollah are raising their children to hate Jews. Jesus Christ, man. I think you hate Jews more than anyone else, really. This is something unbelievable. So they did all of this, and they instituted this matter policy because in the past they were so embarrassed by having to release Palestinians from prison. And keep in mind, these are not people that are necessarily convicted. Many Palestinians are held without charge or trial, okay? And they're not even allowed to know why, if there is a charge. So this is administrative detention, but usually there are no charges. It's just a suspicion. It's illegal. It's arbitrary detention. That's number one. A lot of them are tried with military courts. It's a war crime. You can't try civilians in a military court as a matter of policy. If you do it temporarily, that's different, but you can't do it across decades with hundreds of thousands of people, which is what the Israelis have done, which is a war crime. So you have many, many, many Palestinians in prison who have done nothing wrong, and even by Israeli standards, even in Israeli military courts, they haven't been convicted of anything. So they're completely and utterly innocent, even by Israeli standards, which demonize Palestinians. So, imagine how much they hate Palestinians, that to see them, innocent civilians released, they're ready to kill other Israelis just to prevent that. There's something really screwed up with these people. There really is. We also have to say that the propaganda they perpetuated that day about, they came in and they ripped Jews from their beds and killed them, and what utter nonsense. All of the examples in this are military bases. Every single one of these military bases. Okay, and then there was another one with the kibbutz. But the point is that the Israelis killed their own people, and Hamas prioritized military installations. Do you see the difference? Hamas went after the checkpoints, the headquarters, the bunkers and barracks, and the Israelis killed everyone on the Gaza side of the border, on the Israeli side of the border, on the border itself, at the festival, in the military barracks, everyone. They didn't leave a single thing they didn't bomb or kill. So you can see the difference here and between the military application of how Hamas prosecute a war, whereas the compared to the Israelis and how they prosecute a war. And I'd also remind you that there was a lot of propaganda about how they raped people and, that they burnt babies and they killed pregnant women. Again, I've yet to see a shred of evidence of that. And even just, let's say, a normal killing, right? A quote unquote normal killing, like this, where you're using guns or shells or missiles. We don't know how many of them were actually killed by Hamas. What does that mean? It means that there's a very good chance, given how indiscriminate and how the Israelis are more firepower, there's a very good chance that Israel killed most of the people that day. If you're in the air and you have tanks on the ground and you have surveillance, obviously you can kill more people, and they did. They are saying they fired indiscriminately. They're admitting it. Hamas do not do that. Hamas have never done that. There is no precedent for that. There is precedent for the Israelis. Israelis always kill indiscriminately and bomb indiscriminately, and they're doing it to their own people, and they've done it to their own people. Hannibal directive is not new. It didn't come out of this episode. So, this is good journalism in this article. It's very good journalism. Well done to them, but it's a bit too late. I mean, July 7, wonderful. Where were you on October 7, right? Because the Israelis used a lot of this propaganda to justify the war, which if you think about it, it still doesn't excuse anything. Like, let's say, for example, for argument's sake, that all the propaganda was true. There were rapes. Every single person that day was killed by Hamas. How does that justify genocide? It doesn't. So same thing with weapons of mass destruction. How do weapons of mass destruction justify invading Iraq? France has weapons of mass destruction. Israel has weapons of mass destruction. Why don't you invade them? So none of the propaganda ever justifies the crime anyway. But in addition to that, it's bullshit and it's completely made up. In addition to that. So their pretexts are not even real. They're exactly that. They're pretexts. They're completely made up nonsense. And the truth always comes out afterwards. So you have the BBC, for example. They go and do a documentary. What was it called? Once Upon a Time in Iraq? I forgot. But they do a documentary in 2020 or 2021 about Iraq. And it's more or less okay. There's some things in it I don't agree with. But in any case, the point is they show the civilian toll. Yes? And it's like, okay, well, it's very good that you did this and you interviewed Iraqis and you showed what they went through in the war. Where the fuck were you before the war? Why don't you prevent the war from happening in the first place? Why do you wait till the war is done and all these people have suffered and then you make the documentary about how the reasons behind the war were not real? Motherfucker, you're supposed to do that when it matters, when it counts. You hold the government to account when it counts, not after, when nobody cares, when the government is gone. I don't even know how many governments we've had since then in England. We've changed prime minister like socks. So, it's ridiculous. It's lazy. It's lazy in that regard. So, and this is, I can say the same for this, right? It's good journalism, but the timing of it is lazy. It should have been done when it counted the most, when, all the propaganda in the media was at its height. It was at an apogee, at a climactic point in the mainstream media. And the Western mainstream media always do this to demonize Muslims and Arabs. They always do it. And if they're not doing that, they're doing it to Russians or they're doing it to Vietnamese or the Chinese or whatever. So you have to counter the propaganda when it happens. In any case, good journalism, so some insightful things and insightful details that we didn't have before. But I was telling you back in October that the Israelis killed their own people. They have the Hannibal directive. They used missiles from the helicopters. The helicopters ran out of munitions. Do you know that? The helicopters that were sent up in the air fired every single thing they had in there, and they were ordered to do that. They were ordered to empty their guns, their cannons, and their missiles, to empty them. All right? We've got the videos of the tanks. We've got the drone footage. We've got the soldiers saying to the papers they shot at their own people. We've got Israelis saying they were shot at by their own people. I mean, what more do you need? What more do you need? And again, even then, why is it wrong for Hamas to attack Israelis? These are military targets. They're legitimate. They're legal under international law. There are very, very few Israeli civilians. How many Israelis are people that are under 18 or grannies and grandfathers who are not in the army? How many of them? Because they're all of the other ones from 18 to 40 years old. You have to go to the army. You're male, you're female, it doesn't matter. You have to go to the army. You are a combatant. By definition, a combatant. Okay? So, they kill tens of thousands of Palestinians and say, oh, well, we have to do that because we're targeting terrorists. Why can't Hamas also kill Israeli civilians? Because they have to target Israeli military targets. Why is it okay for Zionists to do that and Americans to do that, but it's not okay for Palestinians to have collateral damage? They don't get to have collateral damage. And especially in a society where every man and woman has to join the army. It's a society of combatants. And the ones that are not in the army all have guns at home. They got settlers shooting Palestinians with impunity. You can literally, I swear to God, if you're a Jew from Morocco or Britain, you can get on a plane this second and go to Israel, get nationality, get an illegal house in the West Bank, and get a rifle and murder a Palestinian on camera in front of Israeli soldiers, and you will not go to prison. That is a fucking fact. And that society needs to be dismantled. It's a cancer. And it produces this. Again, YouTube demonetized my channel because I'm not allowed to say naughty things about Israel. Telling the truth is forbidden. So if you are able to donate a few dollars on PayPal or on a monthly basis on Patreon, please consider doing it, because it would really help me continue my journalism and support independent media. So I'd be very grateful. And the links are in the description and also in the chat. Thank you guys very much again for all your donations and all your kind comments. I appreciate it very much.